Okay, well, welcome everybody. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are. I am here with JJ DeMello. Here, go say hi, JJ.
Hey everyone, good to be here
And
today. Yeah,
yeah, it's my distinct pleasure to have you here. It's an honor to speak with you about Tethered, which is your short sci-fi in our upcoming inaugural anthology, Galleon Dreaming. And so the way this will work is we'll have a brief introduction about JJ DeMello, learn more about him, and then answer some of your questions that people have submitted. The release date for the book is January 1st, 2027 in North America for the Founders Edition. So I'll give a brief introduction. JJ DeMello, him, is an author based in San Francisco, California, where much of his writing is intimately tied to his background as a gay Bay Area native with Filipino and Portuguese roots. As both a reader and a writer, his first love is science fiction, especially anything slipstream or new weird. He also has a strong taste for literary fiction, horror, magical realism, and cocktails that blend any of the above. He's an active member of the literary community at City College of San Francisco, where he earned his Associate of Arts degree in creative writing. And he also holds advanced degrees in public health and epidemiology, working a double life as an author scientist. And so his stories have been featured in Fiction on the Web, Macabre Magazine, Space and Time, Sci Fi Shorts, and elsewhere. And congratulations to you, Jason. In 2025, he won the Editor's Choice Award for Fiction from Forum Magazine. And in more recent developments, his stories coming out in the anthology of dark fiction for the Philippine diaspora. And he's working toward his first full length science fiction novel. So you can find him at jjdemello.wordpress.com. And on Instagram, we'll tag him there. It is j.j.demello. So welcome, JJ.
yeah. Thanks so much for having me. This is great to have this chat. Yeah, looking forward to it.
Awesome. So I was just so excited to speak with you because I personally love to read myself. I love to read historical fiction and also like memoirs, really immersive ideas about what happened in the past from a fictional bent. But as a writer, I don't write that at all. I like to write sci-fi, and I really like what you write because I feel like there's a lot of overlap. So for me, it's like aliens, Encanto, Manananggal in space, and that sort of thing. So I was so excited to learn about your work as well. So I wanted to ask you, first of all, if you had a particular genre that you like to read that's a little different from what you write about, or do you have a favorite author like list that you'd like to share with our community?
Yeah, no, it's funny how you bring up like your reading doesn't totally match up with your writing all the time. Like obviously, we all read a bit of what we write to fit into the genre. But yeah, me too. Like I do find myself reading a lot of like mysteries and more like contemporary literary fiction, but I don't really get as much joy out of writing those. Writing a mystery is like a whole challenge in itself. But yeah, for me, reading and writing, it's sci-fi is definitely the bulk of what I get up to. And yeah, some authors that really kind of come in front of mine of like folks I'll always read are like Kim Stanley Robinson, Octavia Butler, Blake Crouch, and Jeff Vandermeer. I'd say those are like probably the four, and I think all of them kind of speak to having some influence into what I'm into reading and writing. So maybe Kim Stanley Robinson, I think, is a little more hard science fiction than what I get up to. He does a lot of research that I do not do in my work. Yeah, I like I lean maybe more towards like the Jeff Vandermeer, like weird science world. Like you just kind of have to read it and accept like this is a weird world where this sort of thing can happen. But yeah, and then yeah, I love Octavia Butler's futurism and Afrofuturism and taking real things from our society and past into the future. I love reading stuff that's in far-flung, unbelievable universes too, but I think I like it a bit more when it's kind of grounded in our history and experiences.
So this is just so interesting. So me personally, I'm a big fan of China Mieville, and the types of books that he creates are very similar to what you're talking about. So a couple of things. So the gradation between hard sci-fi and soft, not soft sci-fi, but like the opposite of hard sci-fi. I think it's hilarious because we're talking about say Manananggal in space. Like, okay,
Right.
first of all, I don't know if there's any science that we can grab onto for how that might work, but it's so fun to think about, like how it react. I've often thought about, and I have an idea of the separated spacesuit, because like the top half is flying around separately from the bottom half. So separated spacesuit. So yeah, I love what you're talking about far flung, but unbelievable universe, but also potentially grounded in the same sorts of things here. And I know we've talked about this about Filipinos in the future. There's only a handful of us working on that, and it'd be great to think about one, encouraging people to envision what the future is like, and then placing them in there, using our values, our history, our culture, our food, our legacy, just putting it 100, 200, 300, 400 years in the future. So exciting.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of Filipinos, even though not a lot of us are writing sci-fi. I think there's a good chance there'd be a lot of us in the future too. So I think we make our mark. Yeah.
Right. It's a chance. And also, the more that people read and write, the more that people read and write. You know what I mean? Like, we could have whole shelves of Filipino sci-fi, Pinoy sci-fi, futuristic, diaspora sci-fi, any of that. I'm so happy to have a piece that's coming out in an anthology. And I had the Nipa hut, but it was like redone, and it's in the future up on high ladders up by the Carmont line. So I was like, yes, we can do this. We can
yeah. Amazing.
So I guess a question for you, as you've been moving towards this, I know we have talked about this, especially with your award and a lot of your shorts being published. Is there anything on this path to publication that's been somewhat surprising to you, or that's stopped and made you think, not only with the novel that you're writing, but like as you're sending the stories out and getting feedback from them, like anything that struck you or surprised you?
Yeah. I think really learning what a process it is, really the fun part is the writing and revising, but submitting places, it's tough. You have to do a lot of research to even know where to send these places, especially as a writer in the sci-fi space. You can't just be submitting stuff to every like literary magazine out there. Like some are into that and some aren't. So it's like any field, you kind of have to do a lot of homework before, even if your writing's great, to have success, you kind of have to get to know the industry and stuff a bit more. And kind of as an outsider who full-time works more in a science space, it was definitely a learning curve. I think I've kind of hit my stride with, if I finish a story, having kind of a gut feeling about where it should go. But I think earlier on, like even a year ago, I'd finish the story and be like, I don't know how to get this out there. So I think that's my main takeaway.
Oh, absolutely. I have my spreadsheet with every single, cover letter, summary, where it was submitted, when I can expect to hear back, its disposition. And like you're right, if somebody's reading about X topic, they might not be so open to having Y or Z put in there. However, if they are definitely reading a topic, they want to have that in there. I wonder if those editors are looking for those pieces. So it's really just a matter of, matching up and finding your stride, like you say. So that's really, really exciting that your work is starting to get traction and people are starting to find you as part of their collections and part of their, websites and now in print. All right.
That's been an exciting year.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And, I think the other thing is a lot of this is about belief, to some extent. Sometimes people are shy because they don't think that their stuff will do well in a particular piece, or they do believe it'll do well, but they're not willing to like take that first step. And, the editor can't know about your piece unless you take that first step. So you actually submittable or whatever it is, duotrope or email, whatever it is, like setting that account and just going ahead and submitting it. It's the first
you just got to do it.
Like nobody, don't wait for yourself to say no. Let somebody else say no. Like give them the chance, right?
Right. Yeah, not being afraid to, at least, like if something seems like, I don't know if this will be a fit, you kind of try it and know.
Yeah, and I've heard the person who's the kind of like the expert has failed more times than the beginner has even tried. And so they'll fail until they can fail forward and win.
Totally.
Awesome. Well, I wanted to know, we never know where our journeys will take us. You had said that you just started writing and then started submitting, and now you have like this snowball effect. I'm sure other people who are creative, who are listening in, are, on the recording, are interested in your, I guess, your creative process. Or you talked about this a little bit on the blog post you did for us as well. But like, tell us a
Mhm.
little bit about where you come with ideas, because I'm particularly interested in the authors who have a day job, and that day job often really informs how they think about their work. Maybe a situation you find in a clinical situation might be something that you could then bring to your sci-fi, because you're thinking through it, or you're evaluating it, or you're understanding it, and then now you're putting it into the future, zero G, a cold environment in a spaceship. So yeah, tell me a little bit about your creative process and your inspiration.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome question. And yeah, I've definitely gotten that before. So, try to kind of really reflect on what is my creative process. Sometimes it just feels like, oh, it just ends up being a story, but no, there's really a lot there. I'd say one reason I do tend to write certain types of sci-fi that are like a little more grounded in the real life lived experiences. I think lived experience really does help ground stories and like make me want to write about something, even though I focus more on sci-fi. Um, I'm usually like commenting on like something from real life. It's like almost reflective when I write like that. I'd also say, I'm a very visual learner and visual person. So a lot of my stories really do kind of come out of like these very visual ideas and like daydreaming, something I'm interested in, and then all of a sudden something clicks in my mind and it crosses with like space sci-fi or cyberpunk like stock image ideas, and then all of a sudden that clashes in my head with kind of like maybe like a fragment of a plot I had been mulling over. And I'll write things down, kind of like short story idea, like write something about this and this, and then eventually a couple of those things will combine into something I feel like compelled to write. And then all of a sudden I'm up all night, like writing bullet notes, like, oh no, I'm in bed, so I'm not going to get up and go start writing the story, but I don't want to forget it. So I'm like turning over in bed, pulling out my phone, like vigorously writing notes because I don't want to forget it in the morning. And I'd say that's kind of my process. It's like all these little bits kind of slowly build up until I cross some threshold where I'm like, I'm compelled to write this. Because I have a lot of those bullets that I've never turned into stories, but maybe they will at some point once they find the blend I'm looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, hard same. I have a long list of ideas, phrases, just suggestions, dream fragments. And yes, I
Mhm.
do think that you, as an artist, as a creative, you're sifting all the time through what the universe is generating, right? And then you're pulling all these different threads together into a story. So in your story, there might be something from a clinical experience, something that you experience, something else from outside of work, something you saw on the street, something on the bus, whatever, and then you're pulling that all into one kind of new package. So it's true and yet it's fiction, right? Like,
Right. Yeah. Like, and yeah, and I'm not sure like what really is that catalyst that finally like triggers it into something I'm writing about. But I mean, I think I had a note in my phone for like 3 years. I really wanted to write something about some scientists out in the desert. And I mean, only last month it finally clicked, like this is what I want to do with that. But it had been like kind of like mulling in the background of a setting. So yeah, sometimes I start with a setting and it needs this plot point, or I'll kind of have a general plot idea, but it needs those other elements. Yeah.
yeah, I believe it. And also, just keep on work in progress, right? Work in progress, share your work in progress, because ideas are infinite and it's a how you put stuff together. And also, what happens when you give a procrastinator a project? Nothing. So if
Yeah.
you are the one who's making it, you want to take the time to do it right, and also get that spark of inspiration based on, yeah, what is speaking. And people today, I think, just from what we've seen with the response, people want Filipino fiction, they want sci-fi, they want literary fiction, dark fiction, mystery, horror, all of it, magical realism, all of the stuff. And I do want to, so let's just talk a little bit about themes and tropes that you
Mm-hmm.
identify, because I talked about this a bit with Melo, who's another author, a poet of ours in the Bay Area. So First of all, slipstream, and I'll just define this for the audience.
Yeah.
I looked this up. So slipstream fiction is a genre of spec literature that blends mainstream literary fiction with elements of science fiction, fantasy, or horror. So rather than fitting into like a box of just straight up fantasy or straight up horror, slipstream is that like cognitive dissonance, surrealism, and making the familiar feel very unsettling. And so I really think Tethered is just spot on, right? Because it opens as a straight Star Trekky, like we're in space, we're on the ship, right? And something is happening, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a second,
Yeah.
this is not quite exactly what a straight action. And again, I think people really, really like that. They want that because I don't know, we're tired of boxes, right?
Mhm.
So I guess for me, can you walk through some of the ongoing themes that you find yourself continuing to go back to in your work? And actually, if you want to talk about this, do you think that your positionality in terms of like the intersectional world we live in, I often wonder if you have more empathy and more ability to like cross boundaries because of who you are. And so then your work is so much more expansive because you do have, like in any situation, you probably can get 3 or 4 or 5 viewpoints out of it just because of the way you are. So yeah, anyway, tell me
Yeah,
what you
wow. That's a great question. Thanks for framing that. That's yeah, like thinking about that now, I guess that maybe explains why I'm so into these like cross-genre slipstream stories, is because I mean my life is kind of like that. I go from
yeah,
working, yeah,
you're already like in the middle of everything, right? In the
yeah,
sense
yeah.
that
Like
like you're in the
growing
middle
up
of
like in like so many facets of life, like growing up like multiracial with like different cultures, and then my day job is so different from like when I'm off work, I want to be thinking about this creative space. Versus working as like a scientist all day. So yeah, I think that definitely does play into the kind of writing I do. Like I'm trying to think of like themes I've been focused on. Because I love speculative fiction and I love sci-fi, but I'm not really writing like your high fantasy or space opera tales. Like I totally appreciate those, but um I but I also love reading things that are like the literary or like mundane slice of life stuff, and just finding like this weird in between of them where it's like both relatable and unrelatable. I I love playing with that. So I've been like writing a story all about being like an American with like Filipino or Portuguese roots, or like having ties to another country and like going there. And like, okay, that's like a very relatable experience. Like I'm going to this country my like parents or grandparents are from, but then kind of like throwing in like, is there a magical element happening here, or is this person just really confused with this experience? I don't want to give too much away from that story because it's still a work in progress, but that tends to be the themes I'm working with. Like, another project I'm working on right now is sort of like about a scientist who's kind of stuck in his dead-end job, and I feel that way some days. But then the reason this scientist is stuck there is because it's the apocalypse, and he's stuck in his lab, and he can't leave the lab because there's radiation poisoning outside. That's not my experience, but at the same time, there's like elements that are relatable that I'm playing with there. So I'd say that's kind of informing some of what I'm doing right now. Other stories are just really fun. um, so it's nice to have both, or try to get both of those in some stories. And yeah, with my writing group and some of my friends who read a lot of my stories, when this group was coming out with the dark fiction from the Filipino diaspora, I mean, I was really excited because a lot of my people who read a lot of my works in progress, and they're like, yeah, you write a lot of like dark and unsettling things. So I was like, all right, perfect fit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like dark fiction is a way to explore like what actually is quite dark in the world,
Hmm.
And honestly, to some extent, we do want to have a little bit of escape from just the cognitive load of being who we are today in this world. Here we sit in July of 2026. I'm hoping or praying that maybe 5 years from now, 10 years from now, you and I can look back at this and say, yep, that was a time and place and it's different now. But wow, fiction is definitely a way to expand our thinking about where we sit today. And again, I think with your perspectives, I love that idea. Like you're resonating, right? Like people are
Mhm.
inside a parallel reality. Yeah, the scientist is stuck because it's the apocalypse, but also they're stuck because it is
Yeah.
the apocalypse, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Oh my goodness. Well, again, time flies. I just have one last question coming
Mhm.
up for you. I would ask you to tell us a little bit about your like next idea. You mentioned a scientist in a desert. You had a couple others
Yeah.
away. Like, what's your? I guess what can you share with us about your next creative piece that you're looking to get out there?
Yeah, my next creative piece, I'd say there's kind of two this summer I'm like simultaneously working on. I've been writing a lot of shorter fiction that maybe didn't really break 5,000 words lately, and I've done a bunch of that and enjoyed it. But I'm kind of like dedicated, like commit to something a little longer for once, and seeing how that goes. So first is that story about like these scientists in the desert. The working title is Shiprock Station. So it's about this research station in the middle of the desert. Because of kind of like runaway apocalyptic things, the desert gets so hot that they're just stuck. They're stuck in this lab and they can't leave. And the company they work for is like, you just have to stay there and work. We can't get you. So it's a little kind of like ridiculous situation. It's like a little commenting on kind of how people feel in work sometimes. But I'm kind of having fun with that one, and also kind of pulling on some other themes there. And then my other, so that project, can't tell what it's going to be yet, if it's like novella length or short or just a long short story. And then this novel idea, it's a little less far along, but that one, excited to say it definitely has a Filipino protagonist. And some of my other stories that have been published, Mind Reaper and Mind Sweep, kind of comment on this idea of like digitized memory. So I love working with that idea. I've had like multiple short stories about it. I really kind of want to work on kind of this like Filipino PI in Hawaii who's like investigating something going on in this world where there's a mystery, but there's also permanent memories. So that one I'm excited about. That one I think will be a novel. We'll see how long it takes, but those are the kind of two projects I'm excited about right now.
Oh, so exciting. Yeah, like well, first of all, it is hot. That is why. So
Yes.
today it actually is really hot. And then I love that digital memories because how many terabytes or whatever bytes of information can we get to? Because I really think, like we could get to the point where we're just, sticking it in and then you're transferring the memories off to somewhere else. So that's very, very, very exciting to hear about. So thank you so much for joining us again. If you're listening in, you can find JJ DeMelo at JJ DEMELO .wordpress.com, and also on Instagram. That's a J with a dot and then J with a dot and then DeMelo DEMELO. And yeah, we're so excited to work with you, collaborate with you, and get your stories out into the world. Thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, hope you have a good rest of the day.
Yeah, thank you, Nikki. This has been awesome. I'm loving working with you and this team. And yeah, it's great to chat today.